40 days left until Iowans go to vote. And is your approach at this point sort of slow and steady over the month of January, particularly given that it looks like the debate stage is going to be reduced to 6? How is your campaign going to look at that? And how will you define success once the voting starts in Iowa?
Well, you make the most important point, Michael, and that is that the voting hasn't started yet. Every time we look at polls that are based on 200 or 300 sample, we think we have a real answer here. But nobody saw Eric Cantor getting beat by Dave Bratt. Nobody saw Matt Bevin overwhelmingly winning the Kentucky governor race. Polls of the last few years have been so incredibly off base in terms of how the people actually voted. Look, I understand our effort in Iowa, it's going to be steady, but it won't be slow. We're going to be full speed ahead in January because we know the path there. The path, and I 8 years ago got more votes than anyone in the history of the Iowa caucuses. Nobody saw us doing that. We were moving up, but most people thought we'd be doing well to come in third, maybe second. Nobody saw us winning by the margin we did. And 4 years ago, Rick Santorum, 5 days away from the caucus, was in 6th place out of 7 candidates in low single digits, and he ended up winning the Iowa caucuses. Iowa voters are not to be taken for granted. And I still believe that there is an interesting dynamic that will happen when these folks go and vote, as opposed to having a couple of hundred phone calls. Let me mention this real quickly. We polled 5,000 people in Iowa last week. 75% of them said they hadn't made up their mind yet. 58% of them said they haven't even decided who they're leaning toward. So we still look at Iowa as very, very fluid, and it could change the entire trajectory of the race if things are not anywhere near what the pollsters are predicting.
Governor Mike Huckabee, you're exactly correct. You could actually look back to 2004 in the Democratic race, where everybody said it was going to be a bloodbath between Howard Dean and Dick Gephardt. We woke up the next morning and saw that actually John Kerry won and was on his way to the, or at least on his way to the nomination. So a long way to go. Nobody's voted yet. Good luck out there, and hope you have a great Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you.
All right. Still ahead, the snowbirds are staying, why some of the warmest states are seeing the biggest population booms, and how that's impacting everything from business to the upcoming elections when Morning Joe returns. Prominent evangelist Franklin Graham says he's lost faith in the Republican Party. He's renouncing his membership over last week's spending bill. The son of Billy Graham wrote on Facebook, after all the appalling facts revealed about this year's Planned Parenthood, our representatives in Washington had a chance to put a stop to this, but they didn't. Graham compared Planned Parenthood to Nazis and wrote, quote, that shouldn't have been all that was needed to turn off the faucet for their funding. Nothing was done to trim this 2,000-page, $1.1 trillion budget. He said it was why he was getting out of the GOP. Let's go right now to Little Rock, Arkansas. We've got Republican presidential candidate, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, also Richard Haas and Michael Steele still with us. Governor, let's begin with you. I read an article that David Frum has written, talking about the revolution inside the Republican Party. And he quoted you at one point saying, we need to nominate candidates who look more like the people our voters work with instead of like the boss who fired them. Are we getting any closer in 2016 to achieving that goal?
Well, I'm not sure. I do know that voters are very angry. You sense it on the campaign trail. I was just in Iowa yesterday and the day before. One of the things you see is a seething rage. And this budget vote last week that you just referenced from Franklin Graham's statement, it put a lot of people over the top because they just feel like that the whole purpose of working hard to get Republican majorities in the House and Senate was to make some significant policy changes. The Republicans folded. They were given 4 aces, and they laid their cards down before they even anteed up for the game. It was absolutely outrageous to see a whole litany of things, whether it was Planned Parenthood funding, funding for Syrian refugee relocation, 400% increase in bringing in foreign workers to replace Americans. I mean, all the Republicans got was export of oil. Now, what does that say about Republicans? That the only thing they care about is exporting oil? They don't care a hoot about the values of the rank-and-file Republicans? That's why people in the Republican Party are just bolting for the door.
Richard Haas.
Governor, what about defense spending and the rest of the spending we do on foreign aid and the like? What's your view about that? Do you support that? And in particular, given how messy the world is, do you support an increase in defense spending? And if so, where should it go?
Well, I think we have to have an increase. We have the lowest number of ships in the Navy since before World War I. We've decimated our military spending, 25% cut since Obama took office. We've overused the Guard and Reserve troops unmercifully. In fact, it's one of the biggest reasons that our military is just demoralized and truly in trouble. We've got to rebuild the military, every branch of it. So, yes, we've got to do that. And that's an urgency. But that ought to be bipartisan. And, Richard, there was a time in this country when Republicans and Democrats agreed on the primary role of the federal government being that of national defense and protecting us. Now, the sad thing is, gone are the Scoop Jacksons and the Sam Nunns of the world, who were Democrats who believed that the country's defense was just primary. Where are the John F. Kennedys of the day? But that is something that didn't used to divide this country. It united this country. Sadly, you know, we seem to not even be able to agree on the primary function of our federal government, which is to protect us.
But, Governor, where would that extra spending then come from? Would that be an addition, or would you pay for that by cutting back, say, on entitlements or various types of discretionary domestic spending?
Richard, the key is economic growth. We've had such an anemic economy, largely because the Federal Reserve has consistently played with the money supply and done it in such a way that it's kept the bottom 90% of American workers with stagnant wages for 40 years. The result is that you have a just flatlining economy, less than 1% growth in the GDP. There's no way that we can continue on this path. We keep increasing the debt ceiling, we keep spending money, but we don't grow the economy. So the key is not just raising or cutting taxes or raising or cutting spending. The key is truly growing an economy and making it robust. We can't do it with the current tax system because the fact that we tax capital and labor chases both capital and labor off our shore, and that's why there's $31 trillion of offshore capital that we desperately need to get back. And it's also why I support the transformation of the tax system to the fair tax, which is a tax on consumption as opposed to a tax on productivity. Foreign governments are beating the daylights out of us because they don't tax capital and labor, and they import their products, which makes them inherently less expensive than an American-made product. That's just insane for America to keep on that economic path.
Love it.
What a gorgeous cover. That's
what a great story.
One of the most striking covers I've seen on Time Magazine in some time. We're not going to talk about Merkel and the decision. We've been fighting about that beforehand. So let's talk about the year ahead.
Yeah. So, you know, Adele, obviously the biggest pop star.
The coolest thing in the world,
now.
because she's not like an Instagram, Twitter craze, social media driven, PR developed.
Yeah.
She just sings and then she goes to take care of her baby.
The thing about music right now, especially pop music, is a lot of it is written to track. So people come up with the beats, they come up with the hooks, and then the words are folded in to sort of make, you know, fit with the track.
Right.
And that's why you get a lot of really catchy songs on the radio that make absolutely no sense. Adele does the opposite. I mean, she sounds like the way music used to sound because she makes music the way it used to be made.
One of the things that I haven't understood sort of about the music industry for a very long time is bands like the Eagles, bands like Zeppelin, all these throwbacks to the 70s, 60s and 70s. Make millions and millions and millions of dollars still for record companies. Yeah. And it's only an artist like Adele that actually taps back into that vein. Yeah. That she can get people like my daughter and also get people like me.
Yeah. There's a line in the story that she's the easiest pop star to listen to with your grandparents, and there's some truth there. She really just appeals to a lot of people. The songs are simple, they're straightforward, but they have a lot of power.
Did she pose for this picture?
Yeah, and who knew Dior makes a petticoat in Time Red? But
I think most people on this set.
That was not planned.
Nice.
That was.
I have one in my closet. Actually.
Yes, I'm sure you do. You know, the thing about putting this issue together is we're going to be talking about the campaign, we're going to be talking about ISIS. There's a lot of serious stuff coming in 2016. A small respite is that there's also a lot of good culture coming next year, too.
On the campaign and politics, what does Nancy Pelosi have to say about Paul Ryan? I know it's teased.
She hedged her bets. She doesn't know him quite as well as Boehner, obviously, and, you know, we'll see. His leadership style, we also have an interview with him in here, is going to be different, than Boehner's. It's going to be a lot less command and control. He's going to let the conference say what it wants to say much more. I think for him, he knows that for the Republicans to win, they're going to have to offer some kind of contrast. And to do that, they need to get on the same page. And so I think getting on the same page may be more important than getting things done, especially next year.
You go to different areas for the future. We've talked music, we've talked politics. What about business?
So we have a profile of Satya Nadella, the new CEO of Microsoft, the former MS and MSNBC. Really interesting guy, very Steve Jobs-like in his approach to technology, busting down barriers, being willing to let go of the past, even if it's made you a lot of money. Very, very fascinating guy. And
any reason to believe that they can make a dent on
They're on a
Apple's?
roll. They're on a roll. I don't know that it's so much about making a dent in Apple's momentum, so much as making, taking shots that make them look a little bit more hip. And they're doing that. They have augmented reality. They have some cool tablets coming out. They have some cool laptops coming out. They've really changed their the game plan. It's not the old Microsoft.
Did anybody you speak to in the tech world, could they say with any certainty where we will be, like with smartphones and other applications, a year from now?
Well, their view is that the focus is shifting away from the particular device and more to how much you can access wherever you are. So the sort of having the tablet, having the phone, and having the access to data sort of is a given at this point, and now it's really sort of what kind of services you can deliver with that. So.
And in sports, what did the great Jerry West tell you about how basketball's changing?
It's great. The story about Curry is really interesting, especially for someone who doesn't follow sports quite as closely as most. But the most interesting comment about him actually came from the ballerina Misty Copeland, who said watching him play is like watching someone dance. And so he told us that he's changing the game much the way Jordan changed the game, and people who are coming up growing up playing basketball are going to emulate him, and it's a very different kind of style of play.
All right. Well, Time Magazine's The Year Ahead is on stands right now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
She was so 2015.
2016
is the year of my red petticoat. We'll be back in one moment.
Ooh.